All right, so describe the origin of the second wave of the Industrial Revolution. So we talked about this on Friday. And what was the fuel source for this second wave? What type of innovations were created? And a range of dates. So I gave a range of dates up on the slide on Friday. So if you have to, look at the presentation, look at your notes, help you with the bell ringer. It was right at the end. It was right at the end. So there you go. Give you time to work on that. No vocab terms for today. Not bad. Bless you. All right, okay. So the second wave of the Industrial Revolution. So before we get there, real quick, I know you all know it, but the first wave, where did it occur? First wave. Why? Go ahead.
Great Britain.
Great Britain. Yeah, good job. And when we're talking about a span of years here, first wave, what did I tell you to remember for the span of years? All right, what?
Late 1700s to mid 1800s.
Yeah, good job. So late 1700s to right around 1850 to mid 1800s. Good, good. And we talked about some of the innovations of that time already, but real quick, when it comes to the fuel source for the first wave, what was the fuel source? Nick, for the first wave. Cool. Yep. Good job. Good job. And when we're talking about some of the styles of engines, what were they powered by? Oh, steam. Yep. Good job. So we mentioned about the steamboat, right? We talked about the locomotive, the train, right? How that's being introduced and incorporated in many of these countries that are becoming more developed and more industrialized. Yeah, I showed you an image right around 1850 of Great Britain and how that's interconnected with the country, right? So no longer you just have to rely on the natural waterways of means of travel. You can now expand your marketplace and your transportation connecting key locations throughout the country through railroads. Right. We also talked about the textile factories, how that was very important for the time, and we mentioned about the cotton gin, right, spinning mule. And we talked about the we talked about the steamboat, like I said, when it came to travel upstream. So the first time we can utilize that innovation to access even more locations internally, let's say the United States, up the Mississippi River, and expanding trade, expanding industrialization even more. All right, so second wave, where did it occur? Georgia. Connor, go ahead. Germany, yep, good job. Some people say that, oh, it's a mix of Germany and the United States, which there's a lot of truth to that, but we'll just focus on Germany, okay, because that's where a lot of these innovations will occur and be created. But again, the United States shouldn't be left out of it because there are a lot of innovations stemming from the United States, sparking from the United States, causing a lot of change when it comes to this industrial age and when it comes to modernizing, becoming more of a developed country. All right, so spanning years, let's say spanning years, second wave. Connor, yeah, good job. So right around 1870, this is right when Germany is going to be unified as a country. So we'll talk about that here soon enough. But a lot of these new transitions, a lot of these new innovations are from Germany here and causing a lot of change and really developed Germany as one of the rivals to Great Britain in Europe and the rest of the world. So this is going to lead directly into imperialism and this overseas expansion. And eventually, maybe even a war, right? So 1914, what starts in 1914? Oh, World War I. Yep, good job, good job. So we'll talk more about these industrial revolutions that occur afterwards, but we'll just focus here on the first and second wave. All right, so we talked a little bit about the fuel source too for the second wave. What's the fuel source? Nick, go ahead. Oil, yeah, good job. So natural gas, good. And when it comes to this energy, it's going to be utilized in many different things. So like the automobile, right? Cars. Okay, when it comes to tanks, right? Eventually planes, right? So there's going to be a lot of newer innovations that are going to be stemming from this time period. All right. We also talked a little bit about some of these innovations too. What are some of the innovations we talked about? We just talked about some of the inventors, but they also came from. We talked about that. Nick and Walls. All right, steel. Yeah, good job. So with the Bessemer process, it's going to be creating and mass producing steel at rates that we've never seen before. So yeah, iron is sturdy. It's a strong metal, but eventually, right, it will fall apart. It will rust apart. So to try to get a little bit stronger, more durable metal, this Bessemer process is going to be utilized to mass produce steel. And you'll see that with skyscrapers in these urban areas. You'll see that being applied to the military when it comes to creating armored vehicles, when it comes to railroad tracks, right? When it comes to these newer improved battleships, or what they call it, dreadnoughts. All right, what else? What? Combustion engine, yep, good job. So again, utilized in planes, utilized in cars, obviously. So these combustion engines are really taking over from what we saw with these steam engines. Good. Paul. Yeah, electricity, good job. So we talked about direct current with Edison. Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about that today, and alternating current with Tesla and how they're rivaling with one another. So with the video today, we'll talk a little bit about that relationship these two had, and more. It was a rivalry, right, Chris?
We talked about dreadnought, so we can learn about like Imperial Shadow Ship.
Yeah, we will. Yeah, we will. All right. What else? What other innovations? What other innovations? I like that. Connor. Yeah, good job. So communication, right? So why is that important? Obviously, you need a means of communicating when it comes to materials, supply, demand, when it comes to transporting materials back and forth from place to place. So yeah, you have the telegraph, right? When it comes to Morse code, the dots and dash system of communication. And then eventually you have the telephone with Alexander Graham Bell. And then you'll have the radio that's being created, sending microwaves, radio waves, obviously, when it comes to communication. So we talked about Marconi, and Tesla even had a lot to do when it came to these radio transmissions. Anything else? Anything else? I think that's pretty. Matt, go ahead. Combustion engine. All right. Yep. Combustion engines. Yep. Good job. So being applied to cars, and we already mentioned Henry Ford already when it came to the assembly line and mass producing products, like in this case, the automobile car. All right. Good. All right. So the second wave. All right, so we're going to move on. We're going to talk about some of these key innovators a little bit more in detail. Okay, I already gave you the terms for it, but this is where we left off. So the second wave of the Industrial Revolution, again, occurring in Germany. A lot of people say to the United States, which you can see how these two powers are rising or innovating, modernizing right around the same time. And these two countries especially are going to kind of take the reins when it comes to becoming the most developed country post-World War I, right? So with that, Germany, United States, you see a lot of innovations stemming from these two countries, starting right after World War I. Okay, well, even before it, obviously. So with these innovations, it is going to change the world forever, right? When it comes to connecting these places, these rural areas to the urban areas, transporting materials and goods, when it comes to raising the supply of these products, these finalized goods, and ultimately lowering the price, raising the standard of living for all people, right? And just making life a little bit more convenient for all. Hey, Jason. All right, so again, we ended with this slide on Friday, and we're just going to move through some of these key innovators of the time, and we'll just finish up with a video with Tesla and Edison. All right, so Bessemer. So Henry Bessemer. So he was the first person to introduce this steel making process. So at the time it was a little clunky. It'll be later revamped when it gets to the United States with who? What was that guy's name? In Pittsburgh. Yeah. What do you know? There's a lot of places named after this guy in Pittsburgh. He takes this Bessemer process and he tweaks it a bit to mass produce steel even more. Andrew Carnegie. All right, so Andrew Carnegie. You guys will talk more about him next year, maybe the year after, when it comes to the steel making process. But when you think of steel, when you think of Pittsburgh, the Steel City, right? Andrew Carnegie is that guy that really sticks out the most. And if you ever travel to Pittsburgh, everywhere you go, there's roads, bridges, museum, there's schools named after Carnegie. All right, so with Henry Bessemer, he is introducing this new style of making a stronger, highly durable steel, and one that just won't break apart after time, won't rust right away. And this is going to change the game when you think about skyscrapers, think about these industrial cities that we know of today. Okay, and when it comes to railroads, right, obviously that's gonna be utilized as these four themes and then training.
Is that the school
transportation.
mascot?
Seals?
No, that's the school mascot, the ones that are named after.
Yeah, there you go.
Just steel.
There it is. All right, so with this Bessemer process, they would put iron inside of this chamber and they would place molten iron within it. So they would kind of melt down the iron into a liquid form. So then after a process, they kind of spin this chamber back and forth, and then they inject air into it. They just streamline air into the chamber, allowing it to harden, allowing it to stiffen up and become stronger, more durable. And after this process, this would be used again just to kind of heat up again, pour out into little vats pretty much to access into whatever style of, let's say, steel you're looking to create. So this might be, let's say, an I-beam. This might be the rails for a railroad, or I don't know, when they get closer to warfare, this might be utilized for different types of materials on a tank or an armored vehicle. So with this steel making process, this is going to revolutionize the way cities look, right? And how they're going to change, how they're going to alter these skyscrapers and being applied to military strengthening already these new advancements in weaponology. So with this Bessemer process, this is a way to mass produce steel and bringing us even more to this modern age. Without this steel making process, we'd still be stuck in the past, more with brick and mortar yet. Okay, and if anything, right, this Bessemer process, like I said, will be brought to the United States by Andrew Carnegie in Pittsburgh, PA, and really expand the steelmaking process, making the United States the #1 leader and producer of steel. So you'll talk about Carnegie here soon enough, but in any case, this is where it all begins, right? And this is occurring here in Europe again in this second wave of the Industrial Revolution. All right, so communication. So Samuel Morse, right? We talked a little bit about him already with the vocab terms on Friday, but this is the first means of communication. So in the 1830s, this Morse code was sent out. And this was a communication that will help when it comes to receiving products, receiving goods, when it comes to the demand, the supply of goods and materials. So obviously that's important when it comes to price setting. Also, again, you can imagine how it's going to be useful for the military. Right? So when it comes to expanding out and setting up and strategizing different types of maneuvers on the battlefield, it's important to have a long distance means of communication. All right, so with this Morse code, with this telegraph system, there will be cables that stretch from Great Britain to the United States, from Great Britain to Africa, from Great Britain to Asia. And the reason for it is because Great Britain had the ability and really the capital to expand this communication all around the world. Right? It sounds crazy, it sounds ridiculous. But there was a means of telegraph lines that stretched literally around the world, all connecting London, Great Britain, to their overseas territories. So when it came to resources and materials coming from these other territories, okay, they can just communicate pretty easily what's coming out. And if there might be, let's say, a rebellion that they need to squash. So with these telegraph lines, this is important to know, especially when we get to World War I. So if, let's say, Germany wanted to try to relay a message from their internally from, let's say, Berlin, I don't know, and they wanted to try to send it to the front lines, guess where that communication has to go to first? Where does that have to go to first? Let's go right through London. So if you're Great Britain, obviously you have one. You have the step up, right? You have the means of seeing this type of communication and relaying it back and forth. Or let's say just cutting it off. So for Great Britain, when it comes to communication, get to World War I, they literally had the control of communication. And that's obviously a heavy asset to have. That's where you'll see Morse code being created, where you'll have to try to disguise your communications and try to solve them out, try to break these codes from being sent back and forth. And with the Zimmerman telegram, which we'll talk about here soon enough, with World War I, that's what gets the United States somewhat involved in World War I, with the Lusitania sinking, right? And the Zimmerman telegram. Great Britain intercepted this message and said, oh, hey, Mexico is looking to attack the United States. This is what Germany wanted to prompt. And we'll talk about that here soon enough. But like I said, with Great Britain, they had to control communication through this Morse code, right? This telegraph system. All right, Alexander Graham Bell. So here in the United States, so in Graham Bell, yeah, he created the first telephone, and as you can see here, this is what the looks of it was. So you communicate kind of like the old puff and string way. You guys ever do that when you're younger? Yeah, no? Okay. All right. So what that means in communication, it was very simplistic of the time. And if you want to try to communicate, let's say around the community, around the country, even, there's many sets of wires that are connecting you and wiring you to other places so that you can talk to these people. And again, when it comes to the industry, that's important to have. When it comes to prices, when it comes to supply, when it comes to demand, and again, when it comes to the military, that's very, very important. So Alexander Graham Bell, the telephone. So this is around the 1870s. So about 50 years after the telegraph's created with Samuel Morse, you see the telephone being prevalent. All right, and Marconi, the radio, right? There's a lot of debate here with Tesla and Marconi, who came up with the radio and utilizing these radio waves to communicate back and forth. So yeah, you have a radio tower that signals these messages back and forth, and you have to be on the right frequency in order to receive these types of communications. So it's all depending on obviously frequency, and it depends on the wavelength, obviously, when it comes to communication. But with this form of communication, you don't need wires. You don't need to be connected. Okay, yeah, at first it was only about 4 miles these radio waves could really push out, but eventually this would stretch even further. Okay, but there is a limitation of how far this communication can occur. So if you're in your car and the radio, obviously you're traveling maybe, I don't know, out of the county, eventually these radio frequencies will, you'll lose your connection. And that's just kind of symbolizing the time of the radio waves. Again, before, at the start of it, it was about 4 miles. Now, obviously a lot different. It stretches a lot further. But with Marconi and Tesla, there is a rivalry of who actually came up and patented the first radio and use of communication over these radio waves. So the video might actually mention that a little bit. But with Tesla, he was literally ahead of his time when it came to a lot of these forms of communication and utilizing some of these waves, against eventually microwaves, radio waves, for means of communication. All right, so electricity here. Last slide I want to talk about here real quick. So with Tesla, he came up with a form of current, alternating current, that will help relay electricity energy from these power generations, so these AC generators, to, let's say, power a city or power a small section of the city. And with this alternating current, this is allowing for this constant stream of energy, and one that would just not dissipate after time, that would just not run out. On the other hand, you have Thomas Edison that came up with direct current. So with direct current, it's just streaming the energy, the electricity from the power generation site all the way down to, let's say, the last block of the city or last part of a city that where this electricity is being pumped to. And with Edison's direct current, you need more power generation sites. With alternating current, you don't need near as much because this current is streaming back and forth from the generators to, let's say, who is receiving this electricity or this energy. With Edison's direct current, it's just streaming in one direction. That's it, right? Eventually, that will dissipate. Eventually, that energy, that electricity will kind of really end. So when it came to supplying cities units of electricity and energy, it's important to note with Tesla that AC current is a little bit better. And you don't really hear about Tesla too much. A lot of it because Edison was so big at the time and how he created the first light bulb. So Edison creating this first light bulb, even motion picture cameras, he was really well known at the time. And Tesla actually worked for Edison for a bit of time to help him with these and sustaining this type of electrical current. So with Tesla developing these new ways and ideology and ideas of alternating current, this was somewhat of a rival to Edison. And these two kind of clashed back and forth to a point where Edison tried to really strip his name from a lot of the patents that he created, that he developed. Like I said with Tesla, he even came up with a form of radio even before Marconi. But Marconi just emphasized a little bit more And he focused on a little bit more, as Tesla was really taking up a lot of different projects like AC current. And when it comes to electromagnetic energy, so utilizing microwaves that power different types of electronic devices. There's many images of him and even somewhat of a video where he's actually holding light bulbs and they're lighting up from what he calls this Tesla tower, which is streaming energy, streaming electricity through different type of radio waves, microwaves. And yeah, there's a fear though that this type of electrical current would run through people's bodies and stop their hearts and kill them, or just let's say, I don't know, electrocute them. Which there is a lot of fear of that, but it's just so minute. It's very small. It's not like it can actually power, let's say, a school or a building. But in any case, he was ahead of his time of trying to utilize these microwaves to send information back and forth, which we do today with the what? The cell phones, right? The cell phones. So that's pretty important, right? That's just showing that these two men, especially Tesla here, is thinking about different ways of powering, utilizing electricity, and sending communication back and forth, utilizing these microwaves without wires, really in the early 1900s, late 1800s. And that's stuff that we're just really accessing today and that we're using today pretty easy. Pretty much, yeah, pretty much. All right, anyway, with Tesla and Edison, okay, these ideas will change the way, obviously, industrialization is focused in the United States and even in Europe. With Edison, with the light bulb, it's pretty basic, pretty easy to think about. With a light bulb, you can keep these factories open throughout the night, creating a night shift. And what happens if you have workers working throughout the night, rather than just stopping when the sun goes down? You have a larger supply, right? You have a larger supply of goods and materials, which is going to benefit the standard of living of all people. Prices are going to drop if you have a higher supply of goods and materials. All right, and yeah, that's where we'll end for today. I want to show you this video with Tesla and Edison. Is there any questions? Any questions? Okay. So second wave, bringing on a lot of new innovations that we still utilize today. What's up?
You wish you had